The Leader of the Opposition, I think the member for Adelaide will wait for us. I'll give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, many decades ago, Bob Dylan sang about "the answer is blowing in the wind." And in terms of solutions to drive renewable energy, to lower energy costs, to be able to manufacture more things here, indeed, the answer is blowing in the wind. The answer is also in the sky.
My apologies. I'll just interrupt the Leader of the Opposition for a moment. The member has a point.
On the point of order, I stood to my feet to seek the call, and the call would normally alternate. I have no problems with the member for Grainler making a contribution, but just wanted to make sure that I would have the opportunity to speak.
You're
briefly.
going to speak. Okay, so it would after the Leader of the Opposition, we will go to yourself and then to the member for Kingston.
Thank you, Deputy. I didn't want to delay the House, but thank you for that.
Thank you for the clarification. And I give the call to the Leader of the Opposition.
And if the member for Gippsland gives a character assessment again of the Deputy Prime Minister, we might even hang around to listen to the member for Gippsland. We might even hang around to listen to the member for Gippsland on this issue. Can I say that the answer is blowing in the wind, but it's also in the sky in the form of the sun. Today we're at a community solar farm with a cooperative here just off Majura Road that is powering 260 homes here in the ACT. And this legislation is a recognition, perhaps belatedly, by the government in the just pre-election period that maybe there is something in this renewable energy stuff after all. The Prime Minister, of course, said that renewable energy targets were nuts. He also said that the use of electric vehicles would end the weekend, and he also said that batteries, which of course can store renewable energy, are as useful as the big banana or the big prawn. He was vociferous in his opposition to net zero by 2050, and he, of course, continued to run scare campaigns. But it's interesting that, in spite of the fact that some of the rhetorical position has changed on net zero by 2050, of which wind energy can make a major contribution, including offshore wind, the Prime Minister continues to try to do that but run a scare campaign at the same time. So the big problem for the government in electorates like Mackellar and North Sydney and Higgins and Goldstein and Kooyong is that he undermines the pretence of caring about renewable energy and of any transition to a clean energy future by the absurd scare campaign, which at the same time he's trying to run. So he's trying to do both, and that will not be effective because they're onto him. They're onto him, and we think that this bill is a good idea. We'll be voting for it. We called for it a long time ago. This nation has abundant wind resources, and we should be delivering a framework for their exploitation at the earliest opportunity. We do have the opportunity to be a renewable energy superpower for the world, to be for the world what Saudi Arabia is for fossil fuels. And we see that with wind projects like Big Kennedy and Little Kennedy in the electorate of the member for Kennedy. And I travelled there with Bob Catter, looking at those jobs which are driving growth in a regional town like Hughenden. And you go into a town like Hughenden and you go to the pub there, as I have with Bob Catter, and what you see are people who've grown up and lived in that community, some for generations, who with projects like Big and Little Kennedy, which is particularly appropriate as the wind comes down the Cape, through off the Gulf. They're positioned in a way to really maximise the economic benefit. Or you go to Kidston, a project, an old abandoned mine that's now used for hydro with storage. You look at the major solar projects that we looked at in North Queensland, and you know that there is enormous opportunity with renewables to create jobs, to lower energy prices, and therefore to make us more competitive. But for those opposite, with the latest childish nonsense they carry on with, yesterday we saw the Prime Minister putting a mobile phone up here as if there are people in this parliament who oppose mobile phones. It's a bizarre position that he finds himself in, but I'll give him the big tip as he goes to Glasgow. The town which gave the world Billy Connolly does have a sense of humour, but they won't laugh in a positive way, they'll laugh in an uncomfortable way if he starts to do some of the nonsense rhetorical position that we saw in the announcement or non-announcement on Tuesday of no new policies, 94 mentions of plans without actually producing a plan. This is the last opportunity today for him to produce the modelling that he says has been done, but we don't see what that modelling is. How does offshore wind fit into the model, for example, that the government has? All we got on Tuesday was two new initiatives. One, the promotion of the Minister for Resources into the Cabinet, an increase in his salary. The Minister for Resources, who has been out there saying that renewables don't work when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, who apparently hasn't heard of batteries, who, as I've said, he must get a real shock when he turns on the tap and water flows out even though it's not raining outside. This must be seen as another miracle from those opposite. But that's one of the two initiatives that we've seen. The second initiative, of course, is that the Productivity Commission is going to have a review every 5 years. They'll produce a document saying how it's all going. Now, that does show that they have got a sense of humour, because the Deputy Prime Minister, who trumpets this as one of the big breakthroughs that were got by the National Party, has said about Productivity Commission reports that he uses them, to quote him, when I run out of toilet paper. That is the respect that he's given to the Productivity Commission. And now he says, guess what, people in regional Australia, I won't show you the modelling, I won't show you any of the detail, I won't attend the press conference with the Prime Minister, but I've got you a Productivity Commission report. It's quite extraordinary. The truth is, though, that if we harness renewable energy and do it in an appropriate way, I don't support wind farms off every coast. There's obviously a whole range of projects that would be entirely inappropriate. But from this government, who knows? Because this government, with the PEP 11 project off the coast of the electorate of the member for Kingston Smith, off Maroubra Beach, off Terrigal and the beautiful Avoca Beach on the Central Coast, off Merewether in Newcastle, off Manly and Freshwater and DY, the idea that you'd have oil drilling off those coasts is anathema. And similarly, even though offshore wind wouldn't produce the same level of damage to the pristine environment that something like oil drilling might, then it wouldn't be appropriate to have offshore wind in those sites either. But who knows with this government? Who knows where this could go? Because when you are so obsessed by not by being defined by what you're against, then it's difficult to advance in a way in which you actually promote support for what you're for. And that's why, after 9 years, this legislation is like everything else this government does, too late. They have denied this nation first mover advantage over that 9 years of inaction. So we do need to catch up around the world. More than 35 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity are in operation, with expected increases to 80 gigawatts by 2030 and 2,000 gigawatts by 2050. And now Australia's entire national energy market, to put it in comparison, is about 55 gigawatts. There are more than a dozen offshore wind proposals in Australia, and appropriate sites that could power substantial parts of our country and create jobs. That is important. But I'll give you the big tip as well of what we need to do, which is to fix the grid. That's what our Rewiring the Nation proposal will do. A $20 billion fund to make sure that we actually plug in the energy that's being created so that you have the most efficient operation of the grid. Now, if you speak to anyone in the energy sector, they'll tell you that this is the most significant thing you can do to drive down our emissions, but also drive down energy prices and to make the system operate more efficiently. But it's beyond the capacity of those opposite to do that, which is why we will need to do it. If we're successful at the next election campaign, it will be critical. But we have, of course, a range of other plans, including community batteries, and that's what we were talking about today with the solar farm operators there in the ACT. We have a plan to make sure that Australians can benefit from the jobs that will be created through new energy apprenticeships. We have a plan for the National Reconstruction Fund, $15 billion. How do you take existing industries, transform them so that they can become more efficient? How do you create new industries as well? We have abundant resources in this country. The Liberal National Party model is you dig them up, send them overseas, get things made, and then buy it back once the value's been added. That's not our model. Our model is that wherever possible you should manufacture things here, create jobs here, create value here. And that is what we are absolutely determined to do, and that's what the National Reconstruction Fund will look at, new industries. Why is it that we produce everything that goes into a battery but we aren't making more of them here? Why is it that we aren't producing wind turbines here on a mass scale like we used to? They've actually departed under this government. Why is it that the two institutions above anywhere else in the world that we should be proud of in terms of breakthroughs in PV solar technology are the Australian National University and the University of New South Wales? But what has happened as a result is the value's been produced somewhere else, in China or other countries overseas have received the value of those scientific breakthroughs. We want to commercialise those opportunities going forward. But here, of course, that will be hard with a government that just isn't fair income. You know, tonight, when the Prime Minister leaves, Australia will have the Australian politics version of the whoopee cushion in charge. Makes a lot of noise. He's uncomfortable about that noise that's there, but he will be in charge of the country, and he doesn't support net zero by 2050. He's opposed to it. So how fair income are they going to be? At least Senator Canavan, the Productivity Commission guy, At least he is fair dinkum and honest about his backward view of the world. But Australia can't trust a government that isn't fair dinkum on these issues.
Members' time has